The entire Trump agenda hinges on Speaker Mike Johnson because it's going to be temporary. If it's just a presidential order, when Trump leaves office, it gets reversed if it's a Democrat. It has to be enshrined into law. And that comes down to Speaker Mike Johnson. Welcome to Doug in Exile as we hear Mike Johnson try to maintain his tiny, 2-vote majority and get stuff passed. This includes impeaching those judges that performed injunctions against the president is on the table. Let's watch Speaker Mike Johnson.
We plan to work together to enshrine the agenda into law and make sure we have a roaring American economy and stability and security and prosperity and strength again. From day one, President Trump has used his executive authority to reverse also the devastating policies of the last administration. There was a lot of that to be done. But as the previous administration made it painfully clear, executive orders can be undone and overwritten, and that's why we have to move it through the legislative process. And we are. Here's a few key examples, okay, of what we've already voted to codify in terms of the executive orders. The President's Election Security Executive Order through the SAVE Act. That's what we voted on and got that done in the House. His executive order banning men from women's sports. We did that through the Women and Girls in Sports Act. His sanctions on the ICC. We did that through our Illegitimate Court Counter Action Act to support our ally Israel. And his Forest Management Executive Order through Fix Our Forests Act. Some of the things we've done so far. Now, this week, we'll add another one to the list. We're going to pass Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill to permanently rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And then we're going to codify dozens more of President Trump's budget-related executive orders, spending-related executive orders through the budget reconciliation process.
Speaker Mike Johnson has gotten some flack. None of these have been signed into law yet. And frankly, just renaming the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, is just a name change. It's not significant. The SAVE Act is significant, making sure that only American citizens vote. That's a big deal. And then next up, the biggest one is going to be Trump's budget. And like I said, Tim Johnson has a very narrow margin of victory, like 2 votes, to be able to pull this stuff off. But Congress is being largely criticized for taking too much time off. They're comparing it to previous administrations under Biden. And they worked round the clock on this stuff. He should be working round the clock. Stop taking time off. Easter break is over, and it's time to get back to work. And now on Speaker Mike Johnson, he gets some questions from the press about if he's going to impeach the judges that performed injunctions against the president.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to follow up on your comments about Congressman Issa's bill on judges. So are judicial impeachments off the table for the rest of this Congress?
No, look, impeachments are never off the table if it's merited. But in our system, we've had 15 federal judges impeached in the entire history of the country. I mean, there may be some that I feel merit that, but you got to get the votes for it, right? And it's a very high burden. And frankly, the bar is high crimes and misdemeanors. I mean, the last federal judge was impeached, I think it was caught taking cash in an envelope. It's like, it's got to be a pretty brazen offense, a real open crime that everybody could agree to. So short of that, if we don't have the votes, and by the way, even if we could get an impeachment article through the House on a federal judge, it's unlikely that they would be tried and convicted in the Senate on that with the divided number we have. So short of that, what can we do? I mean, we've done everything within our power to solve that problem. And remember the stats. I think it's 67% of all national injunctions issued against a president in the last 100 years were against one president. His name's Donald J. Trump. 90% of those were from openly, Democrat-appointed judges that many would regard as this other judge as activists or people venue shop to get in their courts. So we all know it's a real problem. It's not what the Founding Fathers intended. So what can we do using our power in the House? Darrell Iss's bill is a great response. The No Rogue Rulings Act would prohibit a single individual judge from issuing a nationwide injunction like that to stop the entire policy of the administration. I think that is a very common sense standard and one that would kind of get back to the original intent.
So they can write the legislation all they want. They probably won't have the votes given the narrow majority, very narrow. Just takes a couple of grandstanders, one Rand Paul going, this is extra constitutional and I'm not going to sign it. And that's it. And Thomas Massey. I don't have high hopes for impeaching those lower judges.
And eliminate the ability of just one activist to just stop everything. And it's very reasonable legislation. We passed it through the House. We sent it to the Senate with every expectation that they should be able to take that up. And I certainly hope they can, because, again, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. It should be something that every American agrees with. We've got to restore faith in our system of justice. And it was eroded over the last 4 years under the Biden administration for all the reasons we know, and have recounted here many times. And it falls to us to make sure that people can believe. Lady Justice has a blindfold for a reason, right? That the symbol is that it's equal justice under law, as it's chiseled into the marble above the Supreme Court's entrance when you walk in. We have to restore that. If you don't have the people's faith in the system of justice, fair judges, then you don't have anything in a republic. And that's why this is so important.
And I'm going to go with him on, we don't have anything in the republic. If you have all Democrats voting for judges making national injunctions against the president, then like he said, you don't have a system of justice. And I've made that argument for a while. Now here's Jim Jordan on why don't they just impeach the judges. Here's Jim Jordan.
We've got Congressman Jim Jordan, who's the head of the Judiciary Committee. And I know you guys have been looking, a lot at these activist judges. Talk about the problem that it is and what we're doing about it.
Well, the fundamental problem is exactly what the president said. He put his name on the ballot. Yeah. He got elected by we the people. He gets to make the calls as the guy who runs the executive branch, not some unelected federal district judge who somehow thinks they're equivalent to the president of the United States. So that's, the left always wants the unelected to make the calls, the Faucis and the Boasbergs. They want them making the judgments and the decisions, not the people who put their name on the ballot, but that's not how our system works. So we've actually sent a letter to the court. We're kind of curious about how Judge Boasberg gets all these cases. He was the guy who was on the FISA court when they spied on President Trump's campaign. He was the judge that oversaw Kevin Kleinsmith's case, the guy who altered a document, lied to the court, the FISA court. He oversaw that case. He was the judge who said, turn the plane around, bring the bad guy back, who's a member of a gang, who did terrible things, who's here illegally. And he's also now the judge who gets randomly assigned the Signalgate case against Secretary Hegseth. So we wrote the court and said, how does it all work out? How does this random assignment process work? Because we're concerned about the same thing President Trump was talking about.
There's been concerns about, like a judiciary that can, weaponize itself. This is not a new problem in this country. This is not a new fear that judges could, exaggerate their power, however you want to say it. I can't get the wording right, but this is not a new. And I guess I wonder when does the Supreme Court jump in and do.
Well, that's a real good point on it going to the Supreme Court. But the problem is our system of government is completely corrupt, because if you're picking judges from a pool, say in a DC district, they're going to all be Democrat appointed judges. If you pull from a pool of judges in New York, they're all going to be Democrat appointed judges. That doesn't explain why Boasberg just happens to get all these prime cases and he's the most radical of them. But I still think you have to find a different system of government, because these judges are politicized. It means people like me lose faith in the judicial system, because I know you're not going to get a fair shake from a Boasberg. That's a Democrat operative. That's not fair. Justice is not supposed to be a Democrat justice. It's supposed to be blind.
Something about these district judges that think that they have power over the whole country.
No, great question. I do think some of these cases are going to get to the Supreme Court in a pretty quick manner, pretty quick time frame. Yeah. And Justice Roberts put out a statement a month or so ago about, the proper course of action is, if you don't like it, the decision of a district judge is to, use the appellate courts. And I get all that, but I think his statement just sort of underscores the focus that's now on this issue. And we've taken legislative action in the House. We passed a legislation that said one of these federal district judges who issues an injunction, the injunction shouldn't apply nationwide. It should apply to the parties in that case, in that jurisdiction, not to the entire country. And even Justice Kagan had talked about this phenomena a few years back. So we think there's a chance that bill hopefully can get through the Senate and get signed by President Trump and scale some of this back, some of the power that these district judges have currently.
Yeah, and hopefully relatively soon, because as we know, it's not a lot of time for them to do some of this important work, and they're getting kind of stalled out. And I think that's exactly the point why they're doing all this. I want to ask you about this. Tish James, the New York Attorney General, the one that famously went after Trump over nothing, built her whole campaign on getting Trump, and then throws a nonsense case to try and derail him. Well, she's facing a lot of, some allegations as well. The irony of that not lost on anybody, but she has a new lawsuit against the president. Take a listen.
Today, I am announcing a lawsuit to stop the most sweeping and unlawful assault on public health in our nation's history. This administration is taking a wrecking ball to the Department of Health and Human Services. In just a few short weeks, this administration has unraveled decades of progress.
What's your reaction to Tish James at this point?
I don't know that anybody takes her serious. We know how ridiculous the case was that she brought against President Trump. And of course, the irony with her is now it's being alleged that she did some of the same kind of things that she falsely accused President Trump of doing. You know, it turns out, Rob, you know, if you're the Attorney General of New York, you can't have your principal residence in Virginia. So there's three now. I haven't seen it, so I don't know for sure, but it's been said that alleged that she has.
Okay, well, that's Jim Jordan on the president and on Tish James. Tish James did do the same thing against Trump that she accused him of, which actually she is actually guilty of real estate fraud. You can't run New York and then have a primary residence in Virginia. So she's guilty, and she's largely just being laughed out of court. It doesn't make her harmless, but it just goes to show why my bigger issue on this whole thing is we are losing confidence in the judicial system. That means before you ever even go to court, you already know you're guilty if you're a Republican and you're going to a Democrat judge. You're not going to get justice. That's what happened to Trump in Manhattan and in DC when they would not allow them outside of that to get outside of that case and move venue to a place where Trump could get a fair shake. They went with all Democrat judges, all Democrat district attorneys, attorneys general, lawyers. The jury of pool, of course, were all primarily Biden voters, like 92%. It wasn't even like 60-40. So that's not justice. Our system doesn't work. It's broken. This is even way over Mike Johnson's head. Mike Johnson's hands are completely strapped because he has such a tiny majority that we absolutely have to increase our majorities by real MAGA conservatives. Now, what do you guys think? Will we ever get justice back in America again? Can it happen with anyone outside of Trump? Because this is a rare opportunity for us to fix these things. And like Mike Johnson said, you know, those judges, you can only impeach them for crimes and high crimes and misdemeanors. And I don't think they'd be able to pass muster with some of the rhinos and reluctant people like Murkowski, Susan Collins. It would never pass. I'm Doug, in exile.